Okay, welcome everyone. We are going to talk about familial and developmental factors. This is for week 6. We're going to be talking about attachment theory and parenting styles primarily. So an overview here is what we've been talking about a lot throughout the quarter, which is we want to look at how clients' problems developed. Where did they come from? How are clients reenacting these problems in their life today, and also how they're being brought into the therapeutic relationship. So we're going to be looking at attachment styles. And, just to clarify, this is not about reparenting. It's not quite that we can replace what didn't happen. So Alice Miller, who, if you haven't come across her writing yet, you will certainly do so. She wrote the book, The Drama of the Gifted Child, and she talks about what narcissism is, and there's a spectrum and continuum for that. But she writes a really important quote: "We needed to get what we needed when we needed it." So this is really important developmentally. So we're offering a reparative relationship rather than a replacement for what did not happen. So we also want to help our clients develop self-compassion. We want to change narratives. For example, I deserve to have my feelings understood. And we want to build skills to develop new and healthy relationships. So there's 4 categories of attachment. There's secure, which we can understand as low avoidance and low anxiety. There's preoccupied, which is low avoidance and high anxiety. There's dismissive, which is high avoidance and low anxiety. And there's fearful, which is high avoidance and low anxiety. So we're going to also, I just want to point out that in 1978, Mary Ainsworth was the person who originally talked about attachment theory in this way. She defined it a little differently. And again, you'll find this in current literature in either or. The content's the same, but just to give you a heads up that you may see it described in these terms as well: secure, avoidant, ambivalent, and disorganized. Okay, so looking at the 4 categories of attachment, we're dealing with fear as the primary emotion. In terms of worry or concern of the availability of our significant to respond to our emotional needs. And avoidance refers to comfort and discomfort. So we can also look at that in terms of somatic work, just what feels comfortable, what did not feel comfortable is what dictates our avoidance. And we're talking about levels of avoidance and levels of anxiety in terms of how we understand how an adult client presents in therapy. So let's look at secure attachment style. This is where clients are able to discuss relationship issues clearly and openly. You kind of can follow along what they're describing in terms of current or childhood experiences. You're not kind of confused about what they're talking about. So this is kind of a way just to assess when secure attachment style is present in the client. They're able to show empathy. They have a sense of reality. They're not setting themselves up for disappointment or overly idealizing situations. They've achieved a sense of autonomy and resiliency in themselves, and they can emotionally regulate. And so we're going to look at different ways in which activation and deactivation in the nervous system also plays out in these attachment styles as they are presented by our clients. So with a dismissive attachment style, we're looking at overuse of deactivating strategy. They're going to kind of disappear. There's a distorted sense of self-competence, and there's a distorted view of others also as not having competence. So they're not really going to have a lot of faith that you're going to be able to help them. They're going to deny or minimize their needs. And this is also a response to the non-responsiveness of caregivers. Here, needs are viewed as shameful or unacceptable. So you want to give your client time to build trust. Don't expect this to happen quickly. And you're going to look for short windows of opportunity to reach your client on an authentic level. And so in terms of your practice sessions, you can play around with these different ways of relating as a client. So clients may present as if they do not care when something goes wrong, like it's no big deal. They want to avoid the feelings about their situation. So, and it's difficult for clients if you ask directly about what they're feeling. But you can comment on how clients might feel like they're trying to handle things on their own. Clients, as children, conveyed to their caregivers they did not need emotional support. So providing, again, our basic recipe of attunement, validation, empathy, and allowing them to proceed to receive this, really for the first time. And that's one reason that you want to go slow and give time for this experience to happen within therapy. It can be actually an absolutely unfamiliar experience. So when we talk about preoccupied attachment style, this is almost the opposite in terms of the nervous system. There's going to be exaggeration. There's going to be an anxiety around pursuing closeness. They're going to want to know that you're interested. And they're going to be magnifying distress rather than minimizing distress. And they're going to be very vigilant over a therapist change. For example, it can be something like the other day I changed one of the clocks in my room, and my client made kind of a joke about it, how he didn't like the style and things like that, and he was joking that he wants to gather all the clients together and join a union to protest it. And again, it was kind of playful the way it was presented, but it tells you that there was a need to not lose connection, not lose the relationship, the supportive relationship. And clients in this way can be clingy. You want to make sure that you give them a lot of explanation about any kind of breaks in treatment in terms of vacations or times off or scheduling. And that's a way to reassure clients around this kind of anxiety. And this is a really interesting way to say it, that, the clients are so preoccupied that you just don't have time to be in their own minds. And it's such a relief, even though it is something that they resist. So with preoccupied attachment style, this is a lack of self-confidence and a reduced belief in their own capacities. They see themselves as both vulnerable and unlovable. And clients who are self-absorbed, who responded when they thought to not based on clients' needs. So caregivers' responses were not based on clients' needs. And there's an ambivalence in the child needing to be constantly demanding of attention to secure the attention. So with fearful attachment styles in adult clients, this is where you have the least amount of coping styles. And you will see that there will be a fluctuation between dismissive and preoccupied styles. Much more serious diagnoses is borderline personality disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, major depressive disorder, and history of abuse. There's going to be high avoidance and high anxiety. And in this way, you're going to find an even slower process in therapy. And this is going to be what is known in the field in some theoretical orientations, perhaps as your, quote, 30-year client. So this is a client that will be with you, will need to be with you for a long time. So painful events where the child receives no help to cope with what occurred, no reassurance about the future. And they really provide a framework of other than self-blame. They really do internally feel that not only is it not safe to ask for their needs, but a deep sense of not deserving them. So we're going to switch here into the authoritarian parenting. And this is really helpful just to get an understanding of what types of parenting styles the client was exposed to in their family. And so with authoritarian parenting, you have a lot of control, but not a lot of affection. And there's a lot of strictness. There's lack of affection, there's obedience. And also there's a focus on parent approval rather than self-understanding. So clients of this parenting style are not comfortable with self-disclosure. As they're unable to predict therapists to respond with affection to what they feel inside. So they're looking for approval from the therapist, but in so doing, they're not getting the support that they need to be able to learn to tolerate their own feelings inside. So with permissive parenting, you have low control and high affection. And this is when children wield too much control. And they don't learn to self-regulate. They don't internalize setting limits, and they feel really unsafe. They cannot rely on the parents to set limits, and they don't know how to set limits. And so when they're up against challenges, they don't have a sense that it's going to work out, that someone's going to take care of it. And there'll be more anxiety around making changes or making decisions, or even navigating how safe it is to get their needs met. Parents act more like friends, and this can obviously have a role reversal where the parents' emotional needs are focused on to the expense of the client's needs. And so going back to some of the central nervous system focus that we talked about over the weekend, it literally is impossible to focus on the self when you're focusing on the other. There's a balance that can happen, but when that balance is not supported, there is a neurological sacrifice. There's a regulation of the nervous system, or an over-regulation of the nervous system, which makes self-reflection a physiological impossibility. So with disengaged clients, you have both low control and low affection, and oftentimes this was what we'll refer to as emotional neglect. Passive unresponsiveness leads to feelings of invisibility. Again, this is another cause for distrust in the relationship, and people who have had this condition are going to be more prone to being exploited by others because they just haven't had a chance to locate themselves emotionally. And they're not going to have a sense of that the therapeutic relationship can help. And so again, you want to make comments on how people might foreclose on a moment in therapy where you might offer them support, validation, and oftentimes what will happen, it will be dismissed in a very subtle way or not taken in. And that's one of the ways that you can comment on it. So here we have the authoritative parent, and this is the parent that both gives control and affection. And there's firm limits, but what the difference here is that communication includes an understanding of why the parent is setting the limits. Discipline is combined with affection, and children are given reasons for their limits. And this is really important. And they feel safe within this type of family system. There's explanations, and studies have been done even with very young children at like 18 months. And if they're given really clear directions about things, they're able to solve problems versus ambiguity. So, for example, you might say, hey, can you go and pick that up over there? As opposed to, hey, can you go find the green ball and hold it in your hands and walk it over to me? And so that kind of directions is the same kind of direction that we're talking about when a parent sets limits that have emotional meaning for the child. The child can understand it and internalize it. And that process is what is referred to as the secure base that we've been talking about, that internalization, that my understanding of my feelings sits within inside of me. And that's what we're trying to readdress in clients with these attachment styles. Which are not based on high control and high affection. Okay, so we're going to look at this a really important concept then when parents can discipline by withdrawing love. This is not going to be explicit. And there is a break in emotional connection. And I like Carl Rogers' way of phrasing it, which is conditions of worth. And the client feels it, and this is when being rather than doing, or doing rather than being, the idea here. So rather that children get acknowledged for just being who they are, they only feel validated in terms of achieving approval. And there's a deep sense of loss with clients as you acknowledge this. So you will be working with a lot of grief. So this idea of mystification is also really important when ruptures are not acknowledged. This is really disempowering for the child. As clients, there's a lack of trust in acknowledging feelings. And they're psychologically alone. Children will adopt a critical attitude toward themselves. So this goes back to the idea of the unambiguous versus the very clear, helping the client understand reasons for limits and reasons for addressing emotional needs for the client. And again, this validates the client's subjective experience, supports their initiative, and clarify their own preferences. So again, that's a nice way to define that secure base, or have an image of that secure base. So clinical guidelines, we want to watch for moments when a client initiates something that is directly related to childhood or familial experience. And so you're kind of waiting for the client to start talking about something in their life. And then as that's kind of when you can bring in the relationship between their childhood experiences. You want to help clients come to terms with their family of origin. So, and this is often something that takes a while, because people will often want to hold on to what is good. But we do want to help them change their own responses, and we want to help them reinforce attempts to establish relationships which do not repeat patterns. So in terms of familiar patterns, we're looking at roles and responsibilities are clearly defined between children and adults. And also there could be cultural reasons why some families do not foster emancipation. And then parentification also involves children sensitive and responsive to parents' needs. So this is an overview of the chapter. We'll be able to talk about how to incorporate this in your triads this week, where the emphasis would be on, where if you're the client, you might take on some of these attributes, and we can talk about that on Wednesday night.